Hello, and welcome to this Government Technology virtual Q&A. I'm Zach Patton, the Chief Editor for the Content Studio here at Government Technology. And today I'm speaking with Ron Davis, the CEO of EasyVote Solutions, which provides smart software to help governments with all aspects of election management, helping to make the voting process safer, more secure, and more effective. Hi, Ron, welcome.
Hey, Zach, how are you today?
Good. Now, specifically, we want to talk today about campaign finance management and specifically how communities in the state of Florida can benefit from modernizing their approach to campaign finance. So start off, I guess, by describing for us the situation in Florida today regarding the collection of campaign finance data. What does that look like? Are they still kind of mired in sort of legacy processes, or what's the landscape there?
Yeah, and I would say that they are. As a whole, if we look at the United States as a whole, campaign finance and the transparency of the collection of that data has become more important at every election cycle. Everybody wants to be able to dig into the data and really understand where candidates are getting their money and where they're spending their money. And so if we look at the state of Florida, whether it's at the state level or down to the city level, that is still very important. And if you look at most of these cities, they still are experiencing or carrying this out using a manual process of paper. So a candidate will download a report, will fill it out via paper, and will turn it in that way. And so that's, in the world we live in, that's not the most efficient way,
to say the least. So you talked a little bit about that convenience aspect and about, you touched on some of the transparency. What are some of the other benefits around electronic campaign finance reporting?
Well, I mean, if you look at, there's two sides of this. So from a candidate side, is the biggest benefit is that they can file at the last minute. So not that they're purposely trying to do that, but the flexibility of being able to be able to file electronically on the last day at the very last hours is a big convenience for them. So as they're collecting, all the data that they need, it just, once again, it gives them the flexibility. On the receiving side, which in this case, and what we're talking about is the city clerk's office, it all comes down to just saving time, right? Is that, they're the custodians of these records. They have to produce these records for the public when they want to see them. So any way that they can kind of streamline that, it's going to help them, because obviously if you look at a city clerk's office, there's many different responsibilities that they have.
Yeah, so benefits both on the candidate side and on the city clerk side. So
Right.
I want to go back actually to the point that you were making about transparency, because this is something, as you said, it's something that we've seen just more and more scrutiny around elections in recent cycles. It's really part of a broader trend, I think, toward greater transparency across government. How does this fit in with that broader push for greater transparency?
Well, so we live in a kind of an instant access type world, right? We want it right now. And that's no different than when, whether it's the media or other candidates or any kind of special interest group or the public want to see that data, right? So, I was just talking about the benefits from the candidate side and from the city clerk side. There is a third, which is the public side, because these are automatically being posted to a website for public search. And so, there's a big push, obviously, to be able to have this data and understand where these candidates are getting their money and spending their money. And so, what we've tried to do is not only produce the document itself, but be able to give them various different options on how they can search that. So whether they download the document itself or actually search the data within the document, which is becoming the very popular request from those out there who want to search these documents.
Yeah, so it's really, as you said, it's kind of the candidates and then also the city clerks. But at the end of the day, we are all taxpayers. We're all potential voters. So
correct.
That impact really is universal there. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about the pandemic and the impacts of that on this. We've kind of seen that accelerate this push for digital transformation, again, sort of across the board for state and local governments. How does the disruptions of the pandemic, how does that kind of impact this area of campaign finance reporting?
Yeah, it's been huge. For us last year, we had quite a bit of activity out of our Florida accounts, out of new Florida accounts, specifically because of the pandemic. Because if you think about the process, is that you have candidates who are coming into an office to file their documents, and you have the public coming into an office requesting copies of those documents. Well, in many cases last year, these offices were just shut down, and the city clerks and their staff were working out of their houses or wherever it was. And so you couldn't complete that process as it was, but this is not like something you can just put it off. It has to be done. There are filing deadlines throughout the year where these candidates have to get their paperwork in. And so being able to streamline that whole process electronically from, the initial candidate going into the portal, our portal, and being able to complete their filing, have the clerk be able to accept that filing, and then automatically be posted to a website. It really kind of streamlined everything electronically so that there was no human interaction. And of course, in what we're talking about as far as the pandemic. And so it took a issue they were having and created a solution for it.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to ask one kind of final question here. You talked about obviously the benefits around kind of automating these kind of frustrating manual processes that take up a lot of time. What sort of impact does that actually have on city clerks' offices when they're able to automate some of these repetitive tasks?
Yeah. So if you think about a city clerk's office, the campaign finance portion of it is just one small responsibility to have in their overall office. In many cases, obviously, they're the custodian of all records. They hold all they take care of all the meeting minutes, and they participate in different council meetings. They might be collecting, or might be working with the wills and marriage licenses. And so there's so many different responsibilities. And so anytime that you can start offloading some of the work from one of those responsibilities, just gives them, gives them additional time to spend where they really need to spend it. And so what we've seen is, you kind of think about the scenario of candidates coming into an office and spending time with somebody in that clerk's office to complete that filing. So they're going through, they're spending, and it might just be 10 or 15 minutes, but that's still 10 or 15 minutes. And then you have the public coming into their office requesting copies of those. And if you think about, if I have to go through, especially if it's a paper format, and I have to go through all these different areas of my office to be able to collect all the documents that they're asking for, make copies of it, and be able to give it to them, there is an enormous amount of time that's spent on that, especially during an election, right? Because that's where everybody is requesting it. So by going to the candidates and say, well, here's the portal that you go to do all your filings, and be done with it from there, and then go to the public and say, well, here's the portal where you go and you find everything, and be done from there, then that additional time they can spend somewhere else where, not that any of those other responsibilities are more important, but when you just have a finite amount of time, and being able to kind of carve some of that out and be able to use that in somewhere else is just, it's helpful for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, we know these city clerk offices are overworked and understaffed. So yeah, anything that can kind of help them focus on those higher value tasks is great.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about decision making. And so the more time you have, the better the better decision you can make, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Ron Davis, CEO of EasyVote Solutions, thank you so much for joining us for this Q&A today. I really appreciate your time and your thoughts. Join us again soon for another Government Technology virtual Q&A.